CLS Talks.
Talk to me. Talk to me. Talk to me. Talk to me.
Real information.
Talk to me.
Real education.
Talk to me. Talk to me. They don't talk to me. They look like that want it. They don't talk to me. They back. That want it. They don't talk to me. They back. That want it. They don't talk to me. They back. That want it. They don't talk to me. They back.
Welcome back to the CLS Talks. Good to be here. I'm Lionel Coveney and Des Carty is with me as always. Des, how are you?
I'm great. Lionel, yourself?
Sure, not a bother. You know how it is.
Yeah.
Very excited about this episode. Lots of meaty and juicy stuff to sink our teeth into. But a quick recap, I think, on what we had in the last episode, because there was quite a lot to digest there, wasn't there?
Yeah, and as one writer said to me, it's about time too.
Absolutely right. Couldn't agree more.
Yeah, we spent the last few months throwing up the feedback sessions, and we got an awful lot more questions than we thought we would get, and they went off into different tangents, as you do, and we think we've covered a hugely extensive array of questions, and I think we've covered every possible scenario you could have in relation to feedback.
I think so.
Everything.
A lot of overlaps as well, which was good. So the feedback was excellent from people.
Yeah.
So hopefully people are managing to put some of it into practice if that's what they want to do. And we do know of one or two cases in particular where people have done that and had positive results. So.
Absolutely, yeah. Okay. Will we recap on where we were the last time we signed off?
Yeah, I think so. That'll be a good place to start, certainly.
Okay, so at this juncture, Tom, the man that was had been unlawfully arrested by the Garda, was leaving Portlaoise Guard Station, and his last request to the guards at that time was to be able to get the information that he had in the car, the documents that would help him, and the guards' last comment to him at that point was, "It's too late for that now, you're going to court."
So he appears to be in a spot of bother here.
Yeah, so we'll try and move it on a bit more, because what happened then, according to the book and what Tom said to us, was that they drove him to Tullamore Courthouse, and this is where he first meets and greets the judge, Catherine Staines. And to summarise that, and obviously if there's more information we need to glean from it, we can do that, but to summarise that, he was in handcuffs. They brought him into the court. I think it was from what Tom said, it might be in the book as well, was that they unlocked him from the handcuffs, and he was in the stand, one of the stands there, and the Garda that was bringing the charges, Garda Mahoney in this case, was standing there talking to the judge directly.
Okay.
So then what happened then was, because Tom couldn't hear what was going on, he literally, as he has brought to our attention and in the book, he could not hear physically what was going on in the court, so he moved forward to stand beside Garda Mahoney to tell the judge, basically he couldn't hear what was going on, he wanted to know what it was all about,
yeah,
and he wanted to know what the charges were, why he was in the court, and the judge kind of engaged him, and then not to any great extent. He was asking the judge why he was there. He wanted to know what it was all about. He didn't understand what was going on, and that he told the judge that the guards had taken him unlawfully, that he did try to get documents or bring documents with him, but the guards wouldn't allow him. So all that information that we're talking about here now was given to the judge, in terms of the judge was told the information was there that would have assisted the guards, but the guards refused to allow him access to the car to get the documents.
Okay, now if I was in court and I had made the judge aware of that, perhaps it's naive of me, but I'd be expecting, okay, well, we've got a problem here, so surely the judge will now address the Gardaí and sort out why that happened and why I wasn't given access to the information that would have prevented the whole situation from arising.
Yeah, the only concern that the guard at that point in time, and Tom could hear what was going on, the only concern that the guard was bringing up was that they didn't know who the man was, because the man hadn't actually given them over a name. He wanted to know why they wanted the name and all the rest of it, and that was the only concern as far as Tom was concerned about, between the guard and the judge did not seem concerned about anything else that Tom was saying.
Okay, so he was feeling a bit railroaded possibly at this stage immediately.
Very much so. So with that then, the judge started talking about a bail order. In other words, the judge was going to release at that point in time Tom assuming that Tom would sign a bail order, which means that he would go back to the court of his own recognizance once he signed this document.
Okay.
Now, Tom didn't know what a bail order was, didn't understand what recognizance was or any of those technical legal terms, and Tom wanted to know, like, why would he be signing something like that, you know? And the judge said, well, at that point, well, what we're going to do is break for lunchtime now, and then if you don't come back and have signed this form, then you're going to jail.
So the judge didn't explain to Tom, despite the fact that he indicated that he didn't really know what was going on and what these forms were.
Absolutely.
He still wasn't given any explanation. He was just told sign.
Exactly. Now, there's a quote here from the book, and it's where Garda Mahoney states, "I still don't know his name. He could be Harry or Tom or anyone, Judge." Okay, so the judge didn't know who was before them, and Judge clearly at this point knew that the man didn't understand what was happening.
Yeah.
And she wasn't prepared at that point in time to try and address the issues, as in, you know, as far as she was concerned, the only thing that they needed was a name to proceed with this. She wasn't concerned about the man not having the documents and being prepared and having the ability to demonstrate to the guards he shouldn't be there.
It reminds me a little bit of outcome-based education, whereby the results are decided and you just mould then the facts to it. So the judge wanted a result, some kind of a result here, whatever procedure they use or however they get a fine out of somebody, that's what they wanted. So we'll ignore anything that's inconvenient to that, and we'll just continue on with our case and steamroll her through. Yeah,
just to paraphrase Tom exactly, because this was used again laterally in the proceedings in the court at a later stage, but Tom did say out loud to the judge, "The Garda had attacked, abused and assaulted and wrongfully arrested me, that he had on several counts denied me access to defence materials, to counsel and to family and friends." So Tom told the judge in summary fashion what had happened, and that he wasn't given access to people, to family, to friends, to documents, to anything that might actually assist him or avail him or help him in those circumstances. And the judge just, you know, sidetracked all that, or, you know, it was a big rush job, as so to speak.
Right.
Then the judge then, on the face of it, according to Tom, went out for a way to try and confuse the issue by asking Tom about his frame of mind, or his mind, how he was. And Tom was fairly fast to jump on top of that, because the judge was inferring there was something mentally wrong with Tom.
Okay.
So as a retort to that, as Tom has stated here in the book, Tom has said to her, when she challenged his mental capacity, when she challenged Tom's mental capacity, Tom turned around and said, "What qualifications had she to say such a thing?" So Tom said, "Well, what qualifies you to judge my mental capacity?" Now the judge didn't actually engage with that any further. She didn't keep going down that route, because she doesn't have any qualifications to make a decision about somebody's mental capacity.
And was it a throwaway thing, or was there something more insidious about questioning mental capacity? I mean, if he had turned around and said, "Yeah, well, there is something wrong with me," would that have had ramifications potentially for the case?
Oh, absolutely. Then they would probably commit him to a hospital.
Okay.
And God knows then what would happen after that. But that was a road that they were prepared to go down.
That's amazing.
Well,
it isn't, of course. Yeah,
but it just goes to show you the extent. If you challenge, i.e. ask questions, I wouldn't even say it's challenging, it's asking questions of a guard, and we've discussed this before, they will treat you, they have the attitude test, I think we discussed that previously, and they will adjudge you if you ask questions, and they'll say, well, there's something wrong with this guy if he's not prepared to answer our questions and do what we tell him. And that follows through. You see, there's a phrase out there that about a fish, it rots from the head, and that's true of corruption. That's where corruption starts. It starts at the head, it starts at the top, and it works its way down. So the guard couldn't get away with doing these things if the judges were on top of the guards and saying, "No, you can't do this. You can't actually unlawfully arrest somebody or abuse somebody or assault somebody like that." And then to stop him then gaining access to material that might help him, you've done that as well. So, you know, that doesn't happen unless the judges are part and parcel of that same corruption.
Yeah.
So it goes all the way to the top. It goes all the way through back to the state, to the judiciary, to the politicians, the whole lot. The whole lot is in the mix together. So the man or the woman that's out there on the street asking questions, they will ultimately, if they keep asking questions, find themselves challenging the authority of the state. Ultimately, that's what you're faced with, which is a horrible position to be in, that you have to do that.
It certainly is. And just as a quick aside, you mentioned the fish rotting from the head. A very good documentary out there if anybody is interested in delving more into the mechanisms around corruption in the world that we've found ourselves in. It's called I Am Fishhead. You'll find it on YouTube or Google it or whatever. It's well worth a watch, in my opinion, for anyone who might be that way inclined.
Okay, so the remit of the judge then was to get this bail order signed. Now, on the face of it, it looks like the judge was prepared to let Tom go by saying to Tom, sign this bail order. So they had the lunch break, and during the lunch break, Tom was in the cells in Tullamore Guard Station, and one of either the superintendent or the inspector came in and tried to get Tom to sign a bail order.
Okay.
And Tom just said, well, I don't know what that is. I have no idea what it is, what you're trying to do to me. And again, he reiterated to the superintendent or whomever it was, the sergeant at the time, that he wasn't able to sign something he didn't have any knowledge about. And then, of course, the superintendent or the inspector gave up, and then they brought Tom back to the court, and the judge was only interested. The first thing that the judge was interested in was had they established the identity of the man.
Yeah.
And the guard the man, and said, yeah, I'm satisfied that it's so and so, it's Tom, and that's fine. And then the judge put it again to Tom, are you prepared, are you going to sign this bail order? And if not, you're going to prison. So Tom said, well, I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
How can I sign something when I don't know what it is? And the judge said, right, you're going to prison.
Rather than explain it to him.
Rather than explain it.
Jesus. So this puts Tom in a very tricky position. He's heading back to prison.
Correct.
And presumably he's no idea for how long. I mean, what kind of internment is this? It's indefinite, or so it appears on the surface.
Well, it's a false imprisonment. It's internment. It's the same as being locked up in one of those camps that the states have set up.
Yeah.
You just take people away for an indefinite period at their leisure, and then maybe not bring them back to a court. But the plan, obviously, for Tom was to bring him back to the court the next day, but to teach him a lesson as well.
Yeah.
So there we find ourselves now at this juncture where Tom is being carted off to the prison in Dublin. So on the way to the prison, which was identified as Cloverhill Prison in the book, the guards, there was a bit of a rush. Now again, the time escaped Tom. Tom wasn't sure of the exact times because he didn't have access to a clock or anything like that. But they were determined to get him up to the prison by a certain time. So the guards en route actually broke the speed limit to get him.
They wouldn't do that, would they?
Which Tom has observed. But the other thing as well, the windscreen on the Garda car was actually cracked as well. Okay, so there was a couple of things there that Tom observed.
That doesn't sound like a vehicle fit for purpose.
Well, exactly, yeah. And they were putting Tom's health and safety at risk there by doing that. First of all, by speeding, and obviously then by the cracked windscreen, because something could have happened.
Yeah.
And they would have been wholly liable for that. But anyway, they were prepared to put Tom's life at risk, which they did, and brought him to Cloverhill Prison, and then had him signed in, and he was stripped.
Did he have to sign anything when he was being brought in?
Yeah, the prison guards wanted him to sign something, and he said, well, what for? And again, they weren't able to address him or answer the questions, and then they just let him pass through, if you like, without the signature.
Yeah.
So then the protocol is that the clothes were changed, he was stripped down and put on a prison uniform and then brought up into an isolation cell in isolation. And from what was in the book, I think there was 4 or 5 guards accompanied him all the way up through the prison. And then
he must have been a very dangerous man.
Well, he must have been, but I suppose the guards don't know what they're dealing with, do they? They're not told.
Well, there is that,
yeah. From what Tom said, the guard did ask, somebody asked him, will he be at the prison guard? No, it was the next day a guard asked him what he did, and he said, I don't know. Tom said, and he genuinely at this stage didn't know what it was he was supposed to have done.
And that's a good point to make at this.
There's no charge sheet.
Exactly, and there are probably many people listening thinking, well, he must have done something, but it is worth noting that Tom himself doesn't know what he's supposed to have done.
At that point in time, he doesn't know what the allegations are, what the charges are. He wasn't in a position, he didn't actually manage to contact his family, his friends. They wouldn't allow him to contact anybody. That's shocking, isn't it? They could just take him away abduct him or kidnap him, whatever you want to call it, and just lock him away simply because he wouldn't sign or couldn't justify signing a document that he didn't know what it was about.
This couldn't happen on our doorstep, could it?
Well,
But
look, it does.
Yeah.
It does. So it tells you what you're dealing with, really. You know, they can do that to people that ask questions, and that's what it boils down to. So Tom then settled down. The guards were, according to Tom, polite enough, nice enough. He could tell they were always...
These are the prison guards.
Prison
now,
guards, yeah. They were polite enough. There was no animosity or anything like that. The Mr. Walsh there, according to the book anyway, he was a bit more voracious, a bit more aggressive. He was the warden, the prison warden. But the guards themselves, on the face of it, were friendly enough. They brought Tom a book. They thought it unusual. They asked Tom, did he want the television on? And he said, no, I'd prefer to read a book. And they thought that was unusual. And then one of the prison guards then went and got him a book. Tom asked him, the prison guard asked him what sort of a book, and he said, well, anything on the law.
Okay.
Right? And they said, the prison guard apparently said, well, I don't think we've anything like that, but he said, I'll get something as close to it as I can.
Yeah.
So the prison guard came back a few minutes later and gave him a book and to read. So then Tom again was at a loss as to what time it was or how many hours had passed and all the rest of it. But obviously it was night time, so because they wanted to lock him up. And from there on in, from that time until the next morning, wherever time he was woken to be taken back to the courthouse in Portlaoise, they disturbed his peace, and the chapter title, chapter 6, is called Disturbing My Peace. So again, we've talked about this before, but what they were doing to him was every 20 or 30 minutes they were rapping on the prison door, on the cell door I should say, or opening the latch and banging it closed and turning on the lights and switching them off. So every 20 or 30 minutes they were actually disturbing his sleep pattern.
And we all know a night like that is not going to lead to optimum brain cognition the next day.
Exactly. So that's what was wholly frustrating, was that he couldn't get into a state where he could switch his mind off.
Do you think that's standard practice, or do you think they sensed something about Tom that maybe he did know something or was, in inverted commas, up to something? Or
well, either way, if it's standard practice or it's not standard practice, it's an unusual thing. But if you think about it, it does disturb your mental capacity to think.
Very much so.
So if it is standard practice, it's not good standard practice.
Yeah.
And it does lead to the prisoner, at that point, which Tom was, having a disturbed thought pattern, not just a sleep pattern, but his thoughts were not effective, if you like, as effective as they could be, because he didn't get the sleep to switch his brain off and then allow him to think clearly, because he was tired. And not forgetting that Tom had not eaten any food because he did not want their food in case there was anything dodgy about it. He was drinking some water, but he wasn't taking in any solid food.
Okay.
So he was tired, he was hungry, and they weren't prepared to let him sleep, be it on purpose or be it for another reason. So they did not allow him to sleep. And that, to my mind, is, I don't know what you'd call it. It's an abuse anyway to start with. It's a form of interrogation, or I don't know what else you might call it, but it's certainly not in alignment with human rights anyway.
Well, I think, and by all means anyone can correct me if I'm wrong, this is coming from memory, I think that sleep deprivation, now maybe it has to be for a prolonged period or a more prolonged period of time, is classed as a form of torture.
Yes, that's the word I was looking for.
Yeah. So,
well,
that's pretty serious.
Yeah, well, you see, it's probably a more subtle form, but if you were kept awake for 2, 3, 4 or 5 days, your mind would be a mush.
Yeah, of course.
It'd be a mess. Like, you wouldn't be able to think straight. So even though it was only for that period of time, it still was very difficult, according to Tom, to think clearly about the situation and what he could do next, if anything at all. Equally, he didn't have access to anybody. He didn't have access to writing material. Nobody knew he was there. You know, as far as his wife and family are concerned, he was dead somewhere on the side of the road. So be it. That's the night he spent there. And again, you know, looking at the prison guards were not aggressive, they weren't abusive or anything like that. They were just following process and protocol.
Right.
And then the next day, according to the book anyway, Tom came back down, and he had given over the property that he had on him, which was a phone and some keys and stuff like that, had been given into the prison to the warden. And when he came back down the next morning, they refused to give him the property when he was leaving. and they wouldn't give it to the guards either that were accompanying him. So they, on the parting note, they said to him, "You'll be back here to collect it. Don't worry.
Oh, wow.
You'll be back here." So that was psychological abuse as well.
Yeah, so he's left with that ringing in his ears as he goes off to court.
Yeah. So, you know,
Still none the wiser as to what he has done.
exactly.
Or supposedly done.
Doesn't know the charges. So then that happened. He got out of the prison, and he was accompanied by 2 guards and a driver of a van. And he got into the van. He was in handcuffs, and he got some sleep in the van. I think, from what he said, it took about an hour or so to get to Portlaoise, thereabouts. So he got an hour's sleep, roughly, in the van, which at the time he said was sufficient to let him switch off, and then when he woke, to critically think about what was going on and what he could do to help resolve the situation.
Okay. Well, we're going to be picking up in the next episode exactly there, and we'll see what he did and how he thought and what happened afterwards. So, thanks again, Des.
Okay, more than welcome.
Talk to you soon.
That morning,
The CLS Talks.